Sadly, what has been going on in southern Cameroons for years has not gotten the international attention it should have. Even if the Western world seems worried about the war in Ukraine and has provided every support, it does not care about the war crimes, worse human rights violations, and heinous things happening in southern Cameroon. The heartbreaking truth is that the Western world is actually behind the genocide and killings. Backed by France's Macron and the US Biden, the French Cameroon soldiers are wreaking havoc in southern Cameroons. By now, over 50,000 people have been killed in an act of ethnic cleansing, and over 600 villages have been burnt. Over 1.5 million people have been displaced, while the genocide continues and the world stands in deafening silence. But why is there a conflict in Cameroon which is costing thousands of lives, presenting a picture of the worst forms of war crimes, where dead bodies are peeled and thrown to make room for others coming? Watch this video to know the dark chapter of what's going on in the southern Cameroons. Let's get started. Cameroon is situated in Central Africa and was historically split into two colonial territories, with the eastern part being administered by the French and the western part by the British. Following their independence from colonial rule, these two regions came together in 1961 to establish the Federal Republic of Cameroon. Later, in 1972, the country adopted a unitary system and became known as the Republic of Cameroon. However, even if these two regions were united, tensions existed. Southern Cameroon wanted independence from the French-speaking Cameroon, the same way as it was before 1961. As they want independence but cannot get it because France does not want it, there is a conflict going on. The French Cameroonian military operates under the authority of the central government in Yaoundé, which is French-influenced and carries out killings and mass genocides in southern Cameroons. This crisis predominantly revolves around separatist aspirations, with certain groups in the English-speaking areas of southern Cameroons advocating for either independence or greater autonomy from the predominantly francophone government based in Yaoundé. The Cameroonian soldiers stationed in southern Cameroons generally adhere to the policies and directives established by the central government. This central government largely does what France orders, as it's a francophone African country. Now, you need to understand the different fractions to understand what's going on. There are separatist armed factions in southern Cameroons who want independence, and it's their right. However, to suppress them, there are French Cameroonian security forces who enter southern Cameroons and carry out genocides, so the population can be prevented from fighting for independence. Security forces responded to separatist attacks with a heavy-handed approach, often targeting civilians in the Anglophone regions, the English-speaking southern Cameroons. In 2021, military personnel killed at least 9 civilians in Mautu village, southwest region, including a woman and a child. The soldiers also engaged in looting numerous homes and issued threats to residents. In Gom village, northwest region, 2 soldiers forcibly entered the home of the local traditional authority, the Fan, and subjected 8 individuals to harassment, including a 72-year-old man whom they physically assaulted. Additionally, they shot Nwang Lydia, a 60-year-old woman, when she failed to provide information about a separatist fighter. You see, these French Cameroonian forces enter villages and homes without any regret and kill whoever they want. On June 9, 2021, both regular army troops and the elite Rapid Intervention Battalion, Bataillon de Intervention Rapide, were responsible for the death of a 58-year-old man and the sexual assault of a 53-year-old woman during a security operation in and around Mbuluf village, northwest region. They also engaged in break-ins, property damage, and looting, affecting at least 33 shops and homes, including the residents of the Fawn in Zine village. On October 14, 2021, a French Cameroonian soldier fatally shot Cara-Louise Enondial, a 4-year-old girl, on her way to school in Bua, southwest region. On November 10th, an improvised explosive device was thrown onto the roof of a lecture hall at the University of Bua, southwest region, injuring a minimum of 11 students. What task the French Cameroonian soldiers were given seems obvious. They had to wipe out all villages, towns, and cities in the southern Cameroons until no one was left to demand independence. That's genocide and ethnic cleansing no one in the Western world wants to talk about. But the bitter reality is that this is going on due to France's intervention. Even after ending its colonial era, it is controlling Francophone African countries and using its military to carry out genocides for its national interests. France wants southern Cameroons to be under the rule of the central government, which is its puppet. For that, it has given a free hand to the forces who are carrying out killings in hundreds every day. The excuse presented to justify this barbaric act is that the people in southern Cameroons are rebel groups, hence they have to be wiped. However, that's a wild generalization as millions of people live in southern Cameroons. Under the cover of killing rebel groups, French Cameroonian soldiers are actually killing thousands of civilians. Even one can argue about killing what they are calling rebel groups. In reality, they are freedom fighters who want independence, challenging France's authority. They don't want France to rule Cameroon and kill the native people. Situated about an hour-and-a-half's drive from Bamenda in Cameroon's northwest, Belo is a village that appears largely deserted, except for a military checkpoint, where drunk soldiers are stationed. In the middle of the road lies a charred motorcycle, and further ahead, a lifeless body is sprawled on the ground, partially concealed by a few handfuls of grass. Two girls carrying bags laden with dried fish on their heads explain their presence. "We barely have any food, that's why we came back to collect the fish," they say. They point to the corpse, identifying it as that of a villager, and add, "There are many more bodies. The soldiers burned part of the village." Belo is at the forefront of Cameroon's ongoing conflict between Anglophone and Francophone communities, an increasingly secessionist struggle that has pitted the French-speaking government in Yaoundé against the Anglophone Ambazonia Defense Forces. "We are on our way to Bamenda," says a woman, echoing the concerns of many who requested anonymity due to fear of retaliation. She describes a recent confrontation between the ADF and the army. The army sent reinforcements later in the day, and then they started taking their revenge on the villagers. They burned the houses, raped women, and executed people at random. Those who had the chance to flee are hiding in the jungle. When asked about the number of casualties, she responds, "Many. This is a genocide." The scene in the village of Ambo resembles that of Belo. Small groups of soldiers occupy the village center, while the walls of several houses bear the scars of bullet holes and arson attacks. An elderly man, unable to flee due to a crippled leg, remains with his grandchild. He tells of surviving on bananas for weeks. Another man, displaying a suppurating knee injury from a beating, shares his experience of narrowly escaping the soldiers. He points to a nearby house, explaining that an elderly woman was shot and killed there in her own home. He also witnessed two girls being wounded by bullets in their shoulders. Lucas Cho Ayaba, commander-in-exile of the Ambazonia Governing Council, views the Yaoundé government as an occupying force. 60% of the GDP of Cameroon is earned in Ambazonia, he claims. Oil and wood are exploited by foreign companies, but the profits go to Yaoundé. On the other hand, there is allegedly no money to provide for English-speaking teachers. Ayaba's remarks shed light on the actions of the ADF. Rebels torch trucks transporting large logs, destroy a local government building in Batibo, and abduct civil servants. Ayaba emphasizes, "We cannot stand idly by. Peaceful protests and civil disobedience in the ghost towns simply do not have any effect against the repression of Yaoundé. The statistics alone are deeply distressing. Since the outbreak of violence in 2017, 50,000 lives have been lost. 600 villages lie in ruins. Over 1 million children have been denied education. More than 500,000 individuals have become refugees, while 1.5 million are internally displaced. 10,000 people wither in prison. 5,000 have been gravely injured. 10,000 have endured the horrors of sexual violence. 10,000 women have been widowed, and 15,000 children have been left orphaned. This situation is utterly unacceptable, and yet it has been shamefully ignored for far too long by the international community. Genocide Watch has labeled this crisis as an extermination, and Human Rights Watch has meticulously documented the widespread human rights violations committed by armed groups and government forces, including extrajudicial executions and mass killings. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Amnesty International reports that the fighting between various armed groups and the Cameroonian armed forces has raged unabated for the past 3 years, with civilians bearing the brunt of unlawful killings, abductions, and the widespread destruction of homes and villages. During all this, the international community's silence has been deafening. Armed separatist groups have inflicted killings, torture, assaults, and abductions on hundreds of people. They have also obstructed humanitarian workers and teachers from performing their duties, depriving children of access to education. Addressing the so-called Anglophone crisis in southern Cameroon since 2017, requires acknowledging this history of violent imperialism. The area now known as Cameroon was claimed by Germany as a protectorate during the brutal scramble for Africa in the late 19th century. After World War I, Germany's colonies were ruthlessly redistributed, with Britain taking control of one part of the former German territory of Cameroon and France ruling another. In 1960, France granted independence to its colony, but Britain presented a different choice to the people in a 1961 referendum: join Nigeria or the newly formed Republic of Cameroon. The Anglophone Cameroonians, who opted to form a federation with French Cameroon, soon found the promised equality was never realized. The English-speaking minority has faced systemic discrimination and repression since the 1960s. The current crisis is a direct consequence of Britain's failure to grant independence to its former colony in 1961. What is now termed the Anglophone crisis is, in reality, another legacy of British colonial rule and imperial arrogance. Britain shares responsibility for the suffering of the people of southern Cameroons, and the British government has a moral obligation to act to end this suffering. Yet the genocide is escalating, instead of slowing down. The latest accounts and reports present a ferocious sight of the brutalities in the southern Cameroonians. Among the victims of these horrifying executions, there's even a newlywed couple. The French Cameroon soldiers have turned the public execution of innocent civilians into a gruesome daily occurrence. Hardly a day passes without reports of lifeless bodies of innocent civilians being discovered and executed by these soldiers, whether at their concentration camps near the Bamenda airport, on the streets, or in the wilderness and rivers. This ethnic cleansing has been ongoing for over 7 years, resulting in an estimated death toll of nearly 50,000. Yet the international community stays blind. This playbook of denial is all too familiar. Just as in previous massacres orchestrated by the same French Cameroon-appointed governor in the English-speaking regions, their traditional response is to deny the mass killings. This strategy mirrors the script they followed when they committed the massacre of over 30 innocent individuals in Ngarbu 3 years ago. After months of propaganda and denial, often aided by bought media, such as the VOA reporter in Cameroon, they eventually acknowledged the killings. Similar to previous incidents in Ngarbu, Bali, Ikondo Titi, Santa, and others, no organization or government has held the Cameroonian regime accountable to basic human rights standards. On July 15, 2023, 5 more lives were tragically lost in the Awing quarter of Bamenda. And on July 16, 2023, another 10 innocent individuals were brutally murdered in the Nacho quarter of Bamenda, all at the hands of the same French Cameroon soldiers. As the civil war enters its 7th year, it is important to know that the Biden administration has witnessed more bloodshed among the English-speaking minority than Donald Trump. While Donald Trump failed to resolve the conflict, he undeniably took a strong stance against the Biya administration in Cameroon. Apart from Ambassador Henry Ballerin, who unequivocally condemned the targeting of Anglophones, as he put it, Donald Trump suspended military cooperation between Washington and Yaoundé, and also revoked French Cameroon's benefits under AJOA. Although these actions, coupled with Trump's firm call for negotiations without preconditions, unsettled the ruling elites in Yaoundé and their backers in the Élysée Palace, the Biden administration has, unfortunately, taken a less proactive approach. Meanwhile, genocide continues. Back in June 2023, the Big Babanki massacre occurred, jolting everyone. But just before the horrific massacre of at least 24 innocent civilians by French Cameroon soldiers in the village of Big Babanki, numerous alerts on social media had been directed at the supposed defenders of global human rights in Yaoundé. All in vain. The genocide could have been avoided, but was not. The tragic outcome was the discovery of the bodies of 24 individuals, previously arrested by the French Cameroon soldiers, hidden in bushes, rivers, and other secluded locations. When they were found, devastating gunshot wounds, primarily to their skulls, were seen. So far, silence and disregard seem to be the standard response from the Biden administration. While France's Macron seems to be insensitive to all this, the world should know that these killings are occurring within a minority population that is treated even worse than the Jews in Hitler's Germany. They have been dehumanized, labeled as cockroaches and dogs, and given an ultimatum to abandon their ancestral land or face massacre, while the perpetrators of these atrocities share laughs and wine with U.S. diplomatic authorities in Yaoundé. This is happening in a territory that the United Nations recognizes as having been ripe for independence. as mandated by the UN Trusteeship Council. The historical record of British Southern Cameroons is clear. While conflicts like this in Europe have been resolved through plebiscites or votes rather than warfare, the situation in southern Cameroons has been ignored, as the rich mineral resources of the territory have been mortgaged by the authorities of French Cameroon to Western Alliance members. To make the people of southern Cameroons terrorized, the worst forms of inhuman and barbaric brutalities are carried out. They are meant not only to break and kill people physically, but traumatize those who are left, much like lifeless and soulless creatures. The cries of 14-year-olds being subjected to rape by French Cameroon soldiers are a tool to propagate fear and submission. In an appeal to diplomatic authorities both in Yaoundé and around the world, citizens of Bali Nyanga have pleaded for an end to the abuses inflicted by the colonial soldiers of French Cameroon on the people of the county. In a statement detailing these abuses, Mr. Ng, the chairman of the county, listed incidents of abuse ranging from rape to executions. Girls as young as 14 are forcibly taken by gun-wielding French Cameroon soldiers into the bushes and their makeshift military camp at a nearby abandoned school. According to the communiqué, families and neighbors reported hearing desperate cries for help from the young women as the military engages in these abuses. Those who resist or challenge the arrogant soldiers are shot and discarded, as exemplified by the case of Adama, a young girl who was recently kidnapped from her sleep by the soldiers. After being subjected to rape, she was shot and left by the roadside in a neighborhood in Bamenda. These are the atrocities and genocide carried out in southern Cameroons. Did you know that people in the southern Cameroons are getting killed in the hundreds every day for their independence? Isn't it evil for France to back up a genocide and wipe entire villages with tens of thousands of people? Let us know whether you know about France's heinous face. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.